What's up, everybody? It's Jordan, and welcome to the Sports Behind Show. And on today's video, we have so much to talk about. All things Cincinnati Bengals. We're going to be breaking down every single Bengal game for the 2023 season. We're going to talk about expectations, predictions for Cincinnati. What would Joe Burrow be like this upcoming season? How would Jamar Chase play? Will Mixon have a bounce back year? And so much more. Joining me today, I have Braden Guthrie, also known as Bengals NFL on Instagram. How you doing today, Braden?
I'm doing great. Like you said, if football's coming up, it feels surreal. Then I'm really excited to kind of focus in on the Bengals, really try and determine, predict where the season will go.
Yeah, when you look at Cincinnati, I really feel like the expectations have never been higher for Cincinnati heading into the season. I know it's certainly a debate you can say last year, but I feel like this season and last season have been the highest expectations really for any Bengals season in franchise history. So, like I said, we're going to be breaking down every single game on the Bengals' 2023 regular season schedule. And it's very interesting because about a month and a half ago, Bengal fans were kind of speculating if Joe Burrow was going to end up playing Week 1, which I feel like it was a little bit of overreaction. Training camp and everything like that there's always overreactions when it comes to injuries or players not playing well, stuff like that. But Burrow is pretty much a go for Week 1. They take on the Cleveland Browns in Week 1. If Joe Burrow didn't play this game, or even if he did play this game, which he is expected to play, I'm not going to lie. When you look at the Bengals, in Cleveland, I actually had them losing this game to start off the season. I know it's an unpopular opinion, but when you look at the Bengals, they absolutely suck against the Cleveland Browns. Zach Taylor is 1-5 against Kevin Stefanski. When you look at the Bengals and the Browns, since Stefanski has been the head coach of the Browns against Zach Taylor, there's been times the Bengals have been absolutely blown out against the Cleveland Browns. When you look at the Browns, the Bengals have not been able to beat Cleveland in Cleveland since 2017. This is just like the one team the Bengals can never consistently beat. We can beat Baltimore consistently. We can beat the Steelers consistent. We play amazing against the Chiefs. But when it comes to the Browns, for whatever reason, we just suck against them. So Week 1 in Cleveland, I have us getting an upset loss here to start the season.
Yeah, I have us going 4-2 in the division. One of those losses coming against the Browns, and we are on the same page here because, like you said, history is consistent. We struggle in Cleveland. This offensive line has not played a snap with each other. We saw how that turned out last year. Joe Burrow, while he may be a little healthier, I guess you could say, going into this, he still coming off a injury. We saw that affect him last year. That's not to say he will struggle, but I think it may signify that he may not go Superman in this game, which is completely realistic and okay given the circumstances. But every year we see a game the Bengals really struggle where they should not struggle, where on paper they should be the winners. And that this is one of these games, and every year we lose these type of games at least once, sometimes even twice. And I agree. I think this is one of those games where we should win, but we historically struggle, and there's really nothing to indicate that that will change.
And you mentioned with the offensive line, that's kind of something interesting to look at. The offensive line last season, I felt like it was an overreaction the first couple of weeks. We did struggle a lot in the offensive line, but they just had no chemistry. That was their first time playing with each other. It's going to be interesting to see how this offensive line performs the first couple of weeks. I think after by the time we're looking at week 3 or week 4, this offensive line is going to be in sync and playing very, very well like they did at the end of the regular season. I just don't think people talked about good enough about the offensive line at the end of the regular season last year. Jack Game and the Bengals are good at adapting to their situation. I have high expectations for the Bengal team to adapt to the adjustments they've made. Yeah, it's interesting. When you look at Cincinnati, when they've played teams they've kind of struggled with in the past, they've kind of, done adjustments and everything to make them perform much better. Look at the Ravens between 2000, really, let's say 18 to 2020. We very rarely beat Baltimore in that span, and now we play them very well. Look at Pittsburgh. The Bengals beat Pittsburgh their second game in 2015, and they did not beat them again into the 2020 season, the game that Von Bell hit Juju Smith. And now you look at Bengals in Cincinnati. The Bengals swept Pittsburgh the following season. And they could have swept them last year as well, but wasn't for maybe Clark Harris not getting hurt and stuff. But You bring up a great point there. When we're looking at week two, just mention Baltimore. The Bengals take on Baltimore week two. This is a win. I might be overconfident when the Bengals take on the Ravens. So be it. When we're talking about history and different things like that show us that the Bengals don't have a great chance against Cleveland. Well, history shows us the Bengals have a really really good chance against the Ravens. When you watch the Ravens, you watch the Bengals. I've said this so many times, but the Bengals played the Ravens better than anybody. They play against Lamar Jackson better than any defense in the NFL. They take away his rushing ability, and when you do that, you have a significant chance to win. The first time the Bengals played Baltimore last season, they took that rushing ability away from Jackson, and Jackson played really, really bad. Coaching on Zach Taylor was just really bad that game. The Bengals unfortunately lost against Baltimore, which still aggravates me because we were 100% the better team in that game on the Sunday Night Football game last year. But Baltimore just struggles against Cincinnati. I feel like it's kind of one of those things, the greatness of Lou Anarumo, how good he is against this, typical Baltimore Ravens offense. I know some people might think this offense for the Ravens might be a little bit different. They bring in a new offensive coordinator. They bring in Odell Beckham Jr. I think they're going to be the same. I still think Cincinnati's going to end up winning, regardless of Joe Burrow. If he's not 100%, maybe he's not 100% Week 1 against Cleveland. But I think the Bengals get a win to improve to 1-1 after the second week beating Baltimore here in Week 2 of the regular season.
Yeah, you just said about all of my thoughts on this game. I do think the Bengals win home opener. I think they're going to come in with a lot of energy. Plus, we've seen how Bengals have responded to losing in the past. Look at last year, the embarrassing loss to Cleveland on Monday Night Football. Then, less than a week later, they are an instantly new team. So that's not to say that's what's going to happen here. They're going to struggle week one and suddenly be this Chiefs of last year on steroids. That to be said, I think with back-to-back division games, the Bengals know these are big games. They're definitely going to win one of them. And I do think, like you, it comes against the Ravens. We match up against them better. We play them better. And we are at home. And the offensive line will be gelled a little bit more together, given that's only a week, but that is still a little progress, a little more chemistry going into that game. So I agree, this will be a win for the Bengals.
And when you look at it, I know some people may have the Bengals beating the Browns, which they're expected and picked to beat Cleveland, and then losing to the Baltimore. I just don't get that. If you've watched Cincinnati these past couple of years, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out the Bengals just are amazing against the Ravens. They suck against the Browns. It doesn't make any sense at all. But we both kind of agree here with these first couple picks, and then heading into Week 3, the Bengals have a Monday night game against the Rams, a Super Bowl rematch from a couple of years ago. I believe this is going to be the Ring of Honor. Bringing in the new Bengal players elected into the Bengals Ring of Honor. When you look at the Rams, it's crazy how much their roster is different from just a couple years ago in that Super Bowl game against the Bengals. I mean, look at guys like Jalen Ramsey, Von Miller. Both those guys are gone. Cooper Kupp, he's hurt. He's not going to be playing this game more than likely. And when you look at it, it's just crazy how depleted and how poor this Rams roster is from just a couple years ago. Matthew Stafford's not what he used to be at all. He had lots of injuries this last season. This Bengals team, it's a Ring of Honor night. If they it's a primetime game. I think they're going to be ready to go this game. I really, honestly, I don't think this game's close. I feel like they're going to kind of have revenge on their mind. I wouldn't be surprised if the Bengals win by more than, 10-14. I think this game is a blowout. I just really don't think this one's close, just mainly because the Rams roster is so poor. The Bengals have revenge. And the Bengals roster from that Super Bowl roster a couple years ago is even better now. So I think the Bengals win this one easy.
Yeah, it's almost kind of an insult to say this really is a Super Bowl rematch. This is a completely different Rams team, and one, how you basically said, is not very good at this current moment. The Rams knew what they were doing when they went all in. Their whole objective is, yeah, we want to win now, we'll pay for it down the road. But yeah, right now the Rams are still very much paying the cost for it, and the Bengals are way too talented to lose this game. Even if they do come out flat sloppy, at the end of the day, they are just so much more talented than them. And with it being Ring of Honor, a little more pep, and it being Monday night, So, all that given, I think this is a pretty easy win for the Bengals.
Heading on to week 4 here, the Bengals go on the road and take on the Tennessee Titans. This game, it's another game where I think the Bengals win this easy. Maybe when it's all said and done, the Bengals kind of play sloppy, like you mentioned with the Rams. Just as long as they win, basically, I just do not expect them losing this game here. They have no reason to lose. When you look at the Bengals, they have an elite run defense led by DJ Reader. When the Bengals played the Titans in the playoffs in the 2021 season, I mean, we absolutely shut Derrick Henry down. That was a large reason to DJ Reader and the greatness of Lou Enrumo's defense. And, they rely heavy on their run game. Maybe depending if the Titans start off 0-3, we see Will Levis instead of Ryan Tannehill. Who knows? That will make it definitely more intriguing because you haven't seen any regular season film of Will Levis. But regardless if it's Levis, regardless if it's Ryan Tannehill, I still think the Bengals win this one pretty handily here. Just because, the Titans roster, I don't know how, I understand why they've been in the playoffs for so long as they have, because the AFC South is a terrible, terrible, terrible division. But I feel like they've never had as good a roster as people think they have. And I think this game is another game. I think the Bengals win big. And after this win here, they improved to 3-1, in my opinion.
Completely agreed. Like you said, just way too talented, whether if it is Levis, if it is Tannehill. I'm not scared. Levis, he fell to the second round for a reason. And even if you disagree for that reason, what is completely agreed upon in the draft community is he is very raw and he is not ready to start. So, given that, you throw him starting against this great Bengals defense week 4, that makes it easier for the Bengals. I think they would be smarter to start Tannehill, which is also 100% fine by me. That's the gist of our success. Stop Derrick Henry, make Tannehill throw, which he really can't do against our defense. So I think we will see it be like many of the past few games where it's just we outplay them. It's as simple as that. We shut them down, and our offense even though the Titans do have a somewhat decent defense, their Bengals is just eventually going to overpower them, and it's just going to be how a lot of NFL teams win it. It comes down to just pure talent, and the Bengals have a lot more of that.
So when you look at Tennessee, I would say odds are, as currently heading into week 4, they're probably going to start Ryan Tannehill. But when you're looking at Ryan Tannehill and when you're looking at Will Levis, personally, if I'm the Bengals, if I had the opportunity, I'm going to take playing against Ryan Tannehill 100% of the time. I feel kind of like most people would agree, mainly because Tannehill, he's getting old. He was drafted in 2012. He's getting pretty old. Maybe he has a year or two left. He's nowhere near what he used to be. He's never been great to begin with, but he's nothing more than a game manager. To me, he's very comparable to Andy Dalton. He's not going to be the reason you win games. He's only going to be the reason you lose games. And, Will Levis, like you mentioned, he is 100% a project player. There's a reason he fell to the second round. I didn't understand the hype with him. I don't think he's that good. But if I'm Cincinnati or really any other team in the league, I'm much rather wanting to face Ryan Tannehill because you know what you're going to get. Rather than Will Levis. Yeah, Levis is a project. It's a question mark. But that potential he has, if he plays really good, he could go off. So if I'm Cincinnati, I'm much rather hoping we would play Ryan Tannehill than Will Levis. I don't think it ultimately would matter. I still think Cincinnati wins regardless. But I'm kind of hoping Tannehill starts this game rather than Levis here.
Yeah, we've seen the Bengals have not the best history going against rookie quarterback, especially really early in their career. So I would agree. We've seen firsthand consistently the Bengals can beat Ryan Tannehill and that Titans team. So, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So hopefully the Titans are insane and keep trying to do the same thing over and over, and the Bengals can benefit off it. But like you said, it probably doesn't matter at the end of the day. This will be a relatively easy win for the Bengals.
So when you're looking at Cincinnati, we both have us heading in. We're both have us 3-1 heading into week 5 here. Week 5, we go on the road to take on Arizona. And Arizona, many would say, is the worst team in the NFL. It's kind of hard to disagree. If you saw the video of Jonathan Gannon trying to hype up the Cardinals team, the other day. It was crazy. I mean, I feel I've had a better hyped up speech at the drive through like Taco Bell or something. Like that speech by Gannon was absolutely terrible. I know that how Cardinals players would get hyped up over that. Gannon was a terrible hire in the first place. We kind of talked about this the other day. Just doesn't mesh well with the way their offense is, and they have a franchise quarterback. They don't have a good roster. Kyler Murray is hurt. He's going to be probably out this week. I mean, we're going to be probably playing Clayton Tune. He was an all right quarterback at Houston. He's kind of comparable to Ryan Finley. When you look at it, I mean, Clayton Tune, and then look at Lou Anarumo, are a great defense coordinator. They don't have hardly any weapons on the offensive side of the ball. They have a very inconsistent defense. That's one of the reasons why they hired Gannon to be their head coach. This is a game. I'm not going to be overconfident for Cincinnati. This is another game the Bengals easily win this game. I mean, we're looking at the Rams week 3, Titans week 4, Cardinals week 5. We could win these games by all of these games by 14 plus. I'm not trying to sound overconfident, one of those arrogant fans, but just when you look at this Bengals roster and you look at some of these other teams, the inconsistency at quarterback, and these teams do not have nearly as talented a roster as Cincinnati. I think this is another game the Bengals win big here.
It's hard to say we're arrogant or biased when that's just the reality of the situation, much like how when Chiefs fans or 49ers fans say we're one of the best or the best in the NFL, they have a lot of validity. Sure, maybe at its core there's a little bias in, but that's natural because at the end of the day, the Bengals are front runners. At the end of the day, the Cardinals are, like you said, arguably the worst team in the NFL. And yeah, there's no reason this game should even be close. It should be kind of like the game against the Falcons last year where it was over before we're midway in the second quarter. That's what I'm expecting. Kind of in your words, I'm not trying to be too cocky, but I think we're at the point where we don't need to be, while we are somewhat worried about those really bad games we shouldn't lose, we don't need to be worried about losing to horrible teams like the Arizona Cardinals. These teams for like the Panthers and Texans, they would be beyond embarrassed if they lost to them. So the Bengals losing to them is just not even an option.
So when you look at Cincinnati, we have a 4-1 record heading into week 6 here. This is a game where I really think it could go either way. It's a toss up to me. I feel like obviously the Bengals have a better roster. I think the Bengals are much better than the Seahawks. We both kind of talked about. We think Geno Smith might take a little slight step back this upcoming season, but I have the Bengals winning. I wouldn't be shocked if we lost, mainly because there's always a game or two where the Bengals lose a game, and they absolutely should not. They lose to a sucky team who has a crappy roster, and they lose to them, and they really shouldn't. Then there's also a game the Bengals normally lose a game where they kind of have comparable rosters, and the Bengals may end up losing, and they just had one mistake here and there, and if they didn't have that mistake, they could have ended up winning. I feel like this is kind of a game where it's kind of like that. I think the Bengals will win, but this could really go either way. This is before a bye. Maybe the Bengals are kind of, maybe the players are kind of hoping, excited for the bye. Maybe look, past this week against the Seahawks. This game I think will be close. I have Cincinnati winning, but I can understand why people have Cincinnati maybe losing this game here because Seattle, if Geno Smith can play like he did last season, could be a very good team this upcoming season, make the postseason again. This won't be close, but I still have the Bengals pulling a victory here in Week 6 against Seattle.
Yeah, I also have this as a win for the Bengals. I definitely do think this is going to be a game that's closer than some may expect. But at its core, I am not overly worried. This may be one of the games the Bengals may play down to their competition. I think they may find some struggles early on, be one of these games where it's stressful at the half, but I think we make the adjustments needed, and I think we end up winning by maybe 10 points, maybe 7. But but however many it may be, the Bengals, I do think, win this game.
So the Bengals have a bye week on Week 7. So heading into the bye week, we both have us at 6-1, identical, game by game predictions so far. This is where it might be a little bit different. As the Bengals head into Week 8, they play the 49ers. The 49ers, might be the most best well-coached team, maybe aside from the Chiefs. The 49ers, to me, are a top 3 team in the league. They have an elite offense, elite defense. When you look at their team, it's very I don't know how to describe it. I feel like they're kind of the closest team to Cincinnati in the fact that they just have so many great players in offense and defense, or skill players, or elite. They have an outstanding defense. I mean, when you're looking at George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey, Debo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, they have so many great players. And regardless of who the quarterback is, whether it is Brock Purdy, maybe it's Sam Darnold at this point, I don't care who it is. This game's not going to be a blowout. When you look at the Bengals and Zach Taylor, I believe Zach Taylor's second game as the Bengals coach back in 2019 was against San Francisco. We got absolutely blown out that game. And I think this is Zach Taylor's first time coaching against San Francisco since then. I feel like this is very possible. We could see a Super Bowl kind of preview here. The Bengals, when you look at Zach Taylor since the Bengals have been, when you look at the Bengals since Zach Taylor's been the coach, they've been kind of very inconsistent after the bye. In the 4 years Zach Taylor has coached for Cincinnati, after the Bengals bye, they're 2-2. They've been outscored 125-92. That's an average of 31-23 a game. It's kind of something to look at there, and especially when you look at those teams they played, they lost against. They were good teams. It was I believe it was the Ravens 2019, the Steelers in 2020. Those were good teams. This is a elite, great team. This is a top 3 team in the NFL, like I mentioned. This team blows out those teams the Bengals lost to in the bye weeks. Was that Taylor a couple years ago? I want to have the Bengals losing this game. This could go either way. This is going to be a great game. I cannot wait for it.
Yep, I completely agree. This is another game where I think the Bengals will probably lose. Zach Taylor is 0-2 against Kyle Shanahan. Obviously, his second ever coach game. Then back in the 2020 season, they lost at home in what was a close game, but obviously they end up coming behind. Well, you would think coming off the bye would help the Bengals, as you brought up from the past few years. The Bengals coming off the bye don't always play the best. We don't always see the best coached games. So I think Kyle Shanahan is simply a better coach than Zach Taylor. Like you said, he is arguably one of, if not the best coach in the NFL. I think this is one where it's going to come down to coaching, and I think the 49ers and Shanahan get the edge in that.
And this is a game where maybe also the Bengals maybe kind of look past this game a little bit. It's very hard to say that, but it's also, the following week they play the Bills, who are a really good team as well. When you look at the Bills, that's who they play in Week 9 in Cincinnati. This is going to be a weird game, like heading into the week, just because like with everything that happened last year, like that was like the tickets were selling $300. That had potential to be game of the year. Everybody was so hyped for it. And then the Mar Hamlin situation, it was just absolutely crazy. So Hamlin when he comes back to Cincinnati, that's going to be just a kind of a crazy, surreal feeling and atmosphere in Cincinnati. I think the Bengals win this game. I think the Bills are overrated. I don't understand the hype with them. When you look at the Bills and the Bengals, Lou Anarumo has had elite performances against pretty much every single top quarterback in the league. Lamar Jackson, I don't think he's a top quarterback, but Anarumo plays great against Jackson. Anarumo is amazing against Patrick Mahomes in that Chiefs offense. He was astounding when you look at that Bills offense in the playoff game last year against Buffalo. It was 27-10. They took Stephon Diggs out of the equation for Buffalo. They made Josh Allen play very, very poorly in a snowy weather game that the Bills are kind of not really accustomed to, but kind of much more used to than Cincinnati on their home field. I feel it's another type of performance we could see Lou Anarumo have a great showing. And honestly, when you look at this game, when the Bengals play the Bills, I think Anarumo is going to, kind of contain and shut down Josh Allen. And at the end of the regular season, once Lou Anarumo is going to be hired as a head coach, this is going to be one of those games from this upcoming season when I look back and like, holy crap, this was a big reason why he got a big coaching job. Because if he can shut down Josh Allen, he can shut down just about anybody in the league. I think the Bengals win this one here against the Bills in Week 9.
Yeah, so I have a win as well. Back in that Monday night game, that game is rightfully remembered Damar Hamlin. But if that never happened, the Bengals were on track to kick the Bills' butt that game. The Bengals were coming off on fire. They were up 7-3. They were about to go up 14-3 or at 10-3 minimum. So you could tell the Bengals had all the momentum on their side. Granted, it was only the first quarter, but the Bengals were outplaying them in that short time. The Bengals sure as hell outplayed them in the divisional round. So, based off these few limited times, we've seen the Bengals outplay, outcoach the Bills. I think the Bengals have the better roster than the Bills. I think last year showed that there is somewhat of a gap between the Bengals and the Bills, that it's the Bills aren't exactly in the running for the top AFC title spot. And I think we'll see that reflection on the field. The Bengals will win. It, I think I don't want to say a comfortable win, but type of game where the Bengals are kind of in control, giving you some confidence. So, yeah, I think despite the Bills and their hypeness, and I do think they're a really good team that will win their division, I think the Bengals win this game.
So, week 9, the Bengals get a win against Buffalo. Heading into week 10, they host the Houston Texans. I think Cincinnati wins. I think this is a game where, like, it's going to be closer than people think, and the Bengals, I think, could be on upset watch. Mainly because when you look at Houston, I think they have an underrated roster. I don't think they're going to be a playoff contender this season, but I think at this point in the season, like if the Bengals are playing Houston in week 2, I think they win comfortably, maybe by 14 or 20. When you're looking at week 10, at this point, CJ Stroud's going to be more used, to playing in the NFL. He has no NFL experience right now, but at this point, I think this is when he's going to start to get kind of in his groove and stuff. And when you look at the Bengals, the following week they go on the road to play Baltimore. I think they might be kind of sleeping on maybe Houston a little bit here. They have Singletary, Dalton Schultz, some nice weapons. A couple other, couple nice receivers. I think this is I think this is a game where the Bengals almost get upset, but ultimately I think they end up winning. But this is a game where I think this could be closer than people think, but I still think Cincinnati ends up getting the win here.
I think this is a game where the Texans could give the Bengals some struggles early, especially in the first half. But I think the Bengals outsmart them, outcoach them, eventually outplay them. I agree. I think early in the game it could be noticeable. There could be concerns, but I do think towards the end of the game the Bengals will run away with it just because I think they are that much better and will win by 2 possessions.
So, like I mentioned, the following week, Cincinnati hosts the Baltimore Ravens. In Week 11, they host they go on the road to play Baltimore. This is a game where some people may have the Bengals losing. I can understand that. I mean, it's in Baltimore. Baltimore is a really difficult place to win. I still think the Bengals win this game. I think it's more likely the Bengals sweep Baltimore than the Bengals split with Baltimore. Maybe I'm that confident. I don't know. I just really think the Bengals play Baltimore very good. And also, you have to look at the fact this is week 11. At this point, the odds of Lamar Jackson being hurt and injured, I think, are pretty high given the history that he's been hurt the past couple of years. The second half of the season, I think Odell Beckham Jr. is not going to be healthy at this point. He has a ton of injury issues, and I think when you're looking at this Bengals team heading off of bye, we play San Francisco, the Bills, Houston, go on the road to take on Baltimore, Pittsburgh, at Jacksonville. When you're looking at this stretch, I think this is when the Bengals kind of get on their, hot streak maybe, and a very difficult team to beat. Maybe they're the best team in the league at this point, kind of comparable to last season after they lost to the Browns on Halloween. They won out the regular season. I mean, they were very, very good. You can make a case they were the best team in the league the second half of the year. I think maybe we see a similar situation this year. The Bengals just getting a hot streak and very hard to beat. But I think ultimately the Bengals end up beating the Ravens here and sweep them here in their second meeting of the regular season.
This is where we may disagree a little because, like I said, every year there's a game the Bengals really should not lose. I think this could be it, kind of similar to last year where we had no business losing that game in Baltimore. We just made too many mistakes. And Cleveland game, no, it was another primetime game where we just completely really struggled. Now, this obviously isn't an Andy Dalton primetime situation, but we do see a little consistency that in these divisional primetime games, this is where the Bengals do tend to struggle a little bit. So I think this may be that game where the whole game it even looks like the Bengals should be winning, but they just kind of fall short. And I was debating between this game spoiler and one of the Steelers games. I think it can be either one of those for their second loss in the division. And even though the Steelers scare me a little more, I do think it's going to come to the hands from the Baltimore Ravens.
I will be so ticked off at Cincinnati. Like, I hate the Steelers more than anybody, but it ticks me off so much when the Bengals lose to the Baltimore because we know we're the better team. We play them so good, and we have no business losing against the Ravens. I mean, last year's Sunday night game, that was the maddest and most frustrated I was that any Bengal lost last season. I would much rather see the Bengals lose to the Texans than lose to the Ravens because I know we could beat the Ravens. We're better than Ravens. I mean, everybody has a fluke loss. I'd rather have that fluke loss against Houston than a team who's like Baltimore, who's a big division rival, who some people think are better than us, which I think is just laughable. But I'd much rather see us lose to a crappy team than lose to a team like Baltimore. But heading into Week 12, you kind of mentioned Pittsburgh. I could see us possibly losing here. I have us winning, but it's a toss up. I think the Steelers are going to be. I think the Steelers are going to be very much improved. I think the most underrated team heading into the regular season. Kenny Pickett is going to be better than people realize. I don't get the hate with him. I don't get like, oh, he's going to be terrible and stuff like that. When you look at the second half of the season, I mentioned you can make a case the Bengals were the best team in the league the second half of the season last year. If you're not going to say the Bengals, I feel that the Steelers definitely have to be in that conversation as well. They were 6-2 their last 8 games, and Kenny Pickett threw just one interception. When you look at the Steelers, they very, very easily could ended up sweeping the Bengals last season. Pickett just put a little bit better in the Bengals' second time they met Pittsburgh last season. Maybe the Bengals lose to Pittsburgh and get swept by them last year. I think this is close. This is going to be a very hard hitting battle like it always is against Pittsburgh. It really could go either way. I'm going to take Cincinnati here, but honestly, I don't feel that confident in this game here. This is really, I think, a 50-50 toss up, but it's going to be a great game regardless.
Yeah, I could see this being a big game for George Pickens. You know, I think he matches up really well against Jadobe Awuzie. It seems like kind of similar to quarterbacks. We also see young receivers really kind of break out against us, and Pickens kind of fits that profile. We see a lot of flashes from him last year. As much as I don't like the player, he is damn good at football, to put it simply. And I think he's going to give us struggles. I think we're going to see a lot of talent and flashes from that offense. I think we also have the tight end they got, Washington. If he can stay healthy, he is also going to give a lot of issues for the Bengals. So I do think this, agreed, this game will be tremendously close. I do think the Bengals at home do come out on top. That being said, but yeah, it's going to be really close. It's going to be your typical Bengals Steelers football game. Probably come down to the wire.
So heading into the Week 13 matchup, they go on the road on Monday Night Football to take on Jacksonville. Jacksonville, to me, was kind of comparable to, I mean, when you look at Jacksonville last season, they were kind of comparable to the Bengals during the 2021 season. I think Jacksonville is pretty good, but it also, at this point, when you look at the Jaguars' record, I would say at this point, I feel like it may be a little bit deceiving simply because they play in the AFC South, and the AFC South absolutely sucks. When you're playing the Colts twice, when you're playing the Texans twice, the Titans twice, that's at least 4 guaranteed wins, in my opinion, if you're the Jaguars. Maybe you sweep all of them. And I mean, that's impressive, but you also look at the fact when you look at the Bengals, they have a much, 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 much harder division to play in. I think the Jaguars are good, but I feel like their record may kind of be deceiving just because of poor teams in that division. I feel like this game, when you look at more underrated matchups during the season, maybe a game of the year candidate, I feel like this is one that maybe you can toss in there. Burrow against Lawrence, two of some of the best college quarterbacks we've seen the past decade. This is going to be a great game. I have Cincinnati winning. I think this could be a situation where the Bengals lose. I wouldn't be shocked if we lost, but it's also one of those things, kind of like I mentioned a couple minutes ago. I just feel like at this point the Bengals are on a hot streak, and that when they get going, they're the best team in the league, and they're just super hard to beat. Like last season, the second half of the year. I think we end up beating Jacksonville here on Monday Night Football here in Week 13, but this is going to be a great game. I would not be shocked here if the Bengals maybe slip up and end up losing to Jacksonville, though.
There's a few teams, even when the Bengals have struggled tremendously, a few teams the Bengals have played well, one of them being the Jacksonville Jaguars. I mean, Joe Burrow's rookie year, I believe their first win of his NFL career came at the hands of the Jaguars in Cincinnati. Obviously, very different teams, atmospheres, and this situation, but the Jaguars are one of the teams the Bengals have always played very well against. I agree. I think Jaguars' record may be a misleading, perhaps. I do think they are a really good team. If the Bengals were to come and lose this game, there would be a lot worse teams to lose to. I don't think it would be as big as a deal as some others think because Lawrence really is a great quarterback. He is dominant, probably a future MVP down the road. But I just don't think that Jags team is quite there yet. I think they're going to win their division, but I just don't think they're going to quite match up with the Bengals and the Chiefs. I kind of similar to the Bills, where I think it's going to be a good game, but at the end of the day, the Bengals are just a step ahead of the Jaguars. And when you got guys like Joe Burrow playing on the big stage, I know just a few minutes ago I was saying a little worried when they struggle on prime time, but that tends to come against divisional teams, not conference teams. So in that respect, the way Joe Burrow plays, especially the better the competition, the better he plays, the Jaguars they're going to be playing at a high level. They have a good team, and I think the Bengals are going to respond well to that.
So when you look at the Bengals playing the Jaguars in Week 13, they play the without a doubt the best team in the AFC South, and then Week 14, you can make a case they might be playing the worst team in the AFC South, which is crazy because lots of people thought this team was going to win a division last year with Matt Ryan. The Colts. The Colts. It seems like they just have a constant revolving door who their quarterback is going to be. I would imagine Jonathan Taylor. There's no chance he's going to be playing at this point. Whether he just holds out the whole year, maybe he gets traded. Who knows? But this is kind of similar, kind of what I said about the Texans. This was earlier in the year. I think the Bengals win with ease. I still think they win pretty big here, but I feel like at this point, towards the end of the regular season, Anthony Richardson's going to have almost a whole year under his belt starting. I feel like at this point, he's going to be playing pretty decent and much better than he was in the first portion of the season. I think the Bengals win pretty big here. When you look at the Colts defense, they just don't have a good defense. Their offensive line is nowhere what it used to be. They have Richardson. I mean, they have Michael Pittman. They have like hardly any receivers. They just have one of the worst rosters in the league, which is kind of crazy because, 3-4 years ago, they had a pretty talented roster. But I think the Bengals win here pretty big here, Week 14, against the Colts.
Yep, if Richardson is starting, then I am not worried. Well, I do think we will see, like many other young quarterbacks, he gets better throughout the year. I think he's just still going to be too deep into the fire. I think he is being put in a terrible situation. As we've seen, Anarumo plays really great. He coaches really great against Richardson's type of style of play. So when you bottle all that up, I think the Colts offense is going to find very minimal success against this Bengals defense. The Bengals offense will do what it needs to do, and it will be a relatively easy win.
Yeah, this is a game I could see maybe it being close somewhat the first half, but like we kind of said, a couple of different games. The Bengals just pulled away the second half. I could also see Richardson throwing a couple picks here because, like you said, that Lou Anarumo plays great, coaches great against quarterbacks like Richardson. Richardson and Jackson are very comparable. When you take their rushing ability away, they're one-dimensional and they can't pass. You can't rely on their pass game to win the game for them. And I was looking at something. I think it was FanDuel or DraftKings. I think Anthony Richardson, the last time I checked, was like the 10th highest odds to have the most interceptions. Which to me, I would put Anthony Richardson as number one. I think he's going to lead the league in interceptions this year. I know some people may say Prescott, but when you look at the inaccurate passes of Anthony Richardson, 4 games last season, 33% of his games at Florida, he threw for under 50%. And then you go to the fact that, okay, Michael Pittman Jr., you just double him. They have like absolutely nobody. Richardson could very well end up leading the league in interceptions his rookie year. And like you said, I think he's put in a terrible situation. I don't think he's going to be good this year. I think he might have individual performances where he plays pretty good and shows potential. But overall, I think Richardson is going to be very bad for Indianapolis this season.
Yeah, times in Joe Burrow's rookie season before he got hurt, there were games where it's like we never had a chance to win. We're like, okay, Joe Burrow is showing some stuff. That's really nice to see. It kind of may be that type of game for the Colts where they're really never in it, but Richardson will make a few plays here and there, which I'm not sold on will happen, especially with Anarumo's track history. But this could potentially be that type of game, and I wouldn't be surprised if we saw that throughout the year with Anthony Richardson. Colts are losing pretty badly, but we see Richardson. he's doing pretty all right. He made a few really good throws down the field. That would not surprise me at all.
So when you look at Richardson, a guy who has no NFL experience, then you look at the Bengals, the next team, a guy who has a ton of NFL experience, a quarterback with Cousins. The Bengals play the Minnesota Vikings in Week 15 on December 17th to be announced on the time. This is a game I think the Bengals win. This is a just a game where you look at it, it's like this could be a game where the Bengals just kind of screw up, play like crap, and lose. They have won every single year, like we mentioned, and the Bengals have no business losing this game, but the following week they play Pittsburgh and Pittsburgh. They may be kind of, looking at Pittsburgh, already looking at that, big division rival there. And honestly, depending how good Pittsburgh is, we could be looking at maybe the overlooking Pittsburgh because the Steelers are, kind of comparable with records and the Bengals trying to win the AFC North. I know it might be kind of out there. I think it's going to be pretty close on the AFC North standings, but I just think the Bengals and the Vikings. Kirk Cousins is a reliable quarterback, but at times he has occasional just a crappy performance. Maybe we see this, against the Bengals defense. It's going to be interesting. Chase and Jefferson, two of the top wide receivers in the league. But ultimately, I think the Bengals win here against Minnesota here in Week 15. And I don't know. This is a game I could see the Bengals possibly losing, but I would much rather see them go ahead and get that kind of upset loss towards the end of the season out of the way, and then rather have that be against Pittsburgh, our division rival.
I completely agreed. I am a little worried about this game. Jefferson, as he would to every other fan base, gives me some worries. I definitely think we will see that a lot in the game. Times where the Bengals should be able to get off the field a 3rd and 13, but then they find Jefferson over the middle. I think this will be a frustrating game for the Bengals, but I do think they do come out on top.
So when you look at Cincinnati, like I mentioned, the following week they play Pittsburgh on the road, December 23rd. This game worries me a lot. When you look at Pittsburgh, I think they're going to surprise people. I know I keep saying it, but I think they are much, much, much better than people realize. You mentioned Darnell Washington. They bring in him, a guy who should have been drafted much earlier. They bring in Broderick Jones to help this offensive line. Then you somehow get freaking Joey Porter Jr. in the second round. It's so frustrating. They had an amazing draft. 3 players who should have been drafted in the first round. They got all those guys. They had a very underrated offseason. They bring in Patrick Peterson. I know he's not what he used to be, but it gives them more reliable corners in their secondary. They bring in Allen Robinson. I know he's not what he used to be, but that's a guy who can step up if need be, if maybe Pickens or Deontay Johnson goes down. I think Pickett at this point in the Steelers are kind of going to be on the groove like they were last season. I have the Bengals losing this game in Pittsburgh because, pardon me, with the weather and stuff, you don't know how that's going to go. I just think this is a must win for Pittsburgh at the spot. At this point, because you don't know they're going to be in the wild card spot, which I think they will kind of at this point. This is the game. The Bengals could very well end up winning, but I just think the Bengals ultimately end up losing here to Pittsburgh here in Week 16.
This is the second game we will disagree on. This is, as I kind of hinted at earlier, I was debating between this game or the other Ravens game to bring up as a loss. At this point, I think the Bengals will be on a hot streak, trying to end the season hot. So I do think they get by Pittsburgh. When I say get by, I mean get by. I definitely think this could very well be a come down to the final possession drive, but I do think they come out and kind of seal themselves as AFC North champs in this game.
And I really don't think this is going to be a high scoring game. I feel like this could be a 17-14, very defensive battle because when you look at Pittsburgh, they at times, might necessarily, when you look at the Bengals, they scored, I believe, 37 points the second meeting against Pittsburgh last year. But at times, the Bengals offense kind of looked, kind of shaky against the Steelers defense, whether it was the first or second meeting last season. The Bengals have kind of been able to play pretty well against this Pittsburgh offense. This is definitely a game where, you could see, I feel like Pittsburgh winning, and it's a 17-14 battle. Whoever gets that last field goal, maybe the last quarter. I mean, who knows? Maybe the only team who scores in the fourth quarter could end up winning. But I think it's going to be a very, very, very good game. Could go either way. And then so that's a Week 16 matchup. Week 17 matchup, they go on the road and play Kansas City. when you're looking at the Kansas City and the Bengals. Um, I know lots of Bengal fans are going to have the Chiefs. Excuse me. I know lots of Bengal fans are going to have Cincinnati winning. I get that. I just feel like the Chiefs are going to end up winning this game. I could very well see the Bengals winning. I think this is another one of those situations. It's just literally a flip of a coin. I could totally see Cincinnati pulling this win here, but at some point, I mean, the Chiefs are going to play a very, very good game against Cincinnati. When you go back and watch the AFC Championship game, I don't think the Chiefs necessarily played good. They just took advantage of the Bengals' mistakes and missed opportunities. The Bengals shot themselves in the foot. The Chiefs didn't play great. The Bengals played terrible, in my opinion. There's going to be a moment where Mahomes and this offense that plays very well against Lou Anarumo's defense. Whether it's in Week 17 this upcoming season, maybe it's an AFC Championship game for the third season in a row. I think this is the time where the Chiefs finally end up being the Bengals and played very well. So I have the Bengals losing here against Kansas City here in Week 17.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think you said it really well last year. I think the Bengals should have won in the playoffs and the Chiefs should have won in Cincinnati. Kind of both games, there's kind of I don't want to say lucky point, but mistakes by teams that should have not happened that led to the result happening. But this time, I agree. I think the Chiefs just get by. This is a gut feeling because, as you said, this is a flip of a coin. You can make arguments for either team, but I do think the Bengals just come short here and Kansas City gets the win, which it would be a very frustrating loss, but it would be an acceptable loss. I think this is our fourth loss for the Bengals for both of us at this point. And if you're going to the playoffs with four losses, at this point, the Bengals hopefully and probably will have the division won. So this will be a high scoring game, an intense game, but I do think the Chiefs edge it out here.
I mean, this has potential to be a great game here in Week 17. The regular season finale, they play the Browns. When you look at the Browns and the Bengals, this is interesting because I feel like a lot of this, I feel like the outcome possibly of this game has to determine what the Chiefs' record was when the Bengals were playing what the Chiefs' record was when the Bengals played them. Because let's say the Chiefs only had two losses at that point. The Bengals have four. There's no reason to play your starters. But if the Chiefs had three losses heading into that Bengals game, they have four. The Bengals have four. I mean, then all of a sudden you have the same record. The Bengals, have a tiebreaker and stuff. Then I would imagine this Bengals starters and stuff would maybe end up playing to get that first round bye. Regardless, I think the Bengals win against Cleveland here in the regular season finale, trying to get that number one seed in the AFC. I just really think this game, maybe there's inconsistent play at times, but I think the Bengals ultimately will end up winning this game kind of with ease here because they realize what's at stake. If you're possibly getting the number one seed in the AFC, getting a whole a whole week of rest and everything in preparation, but I think the Bengals beat Cleveland here in the regular season finale.
Yep, I completely agreed. I don't think they'll get swept by Cleveland. I think there will be a lot riding on this game. I think the number one seed for the conference will be in play, and especially if they lose to the Chiefs prior, they know this is a must win.
So when you're looking at Cincinnati, both of us had Bengals record at 13-4. This is interesting because there's a game or two where you look at it, maybe the Bengals don't lose a game that me or you have them losing, but maybe there's a game that we both have the Bengals winning and they end up losing. It's a situation where the Bengals are an elite team, they're a top three team in the league, but regardless of how good they are, they're going to have that one loss when they should not lose. It happens to everybody, and we know it's going to happen. I feel like it's just a matter of who. Maybe it's the Seahawks before their bye. Maybe it's the Vikings before kind of the big matchups against the Steelers and the Chiefs. My kind of upset loss for them is week one against the Browns. I just really think the Bengals end up losing week one. I know it's a hot take. I know Bengal fans will kill me for it, but we kind of talked at the beginning of the show. The history says the Browns should win this game. I mean, the Bengals haven't won in Cleveland since 2017. The Bengals suck against Cleveland. I mean, Taylor's 1-5 against Stefanski. Burrow may not be 100%. Maybe kind of a similar when you look at last year, kind of just inconsistent. It's not really there like he was week one against Pittsburgh. But and then you get some games like I mentioned. You know, they have a hard schedule. I mean, when you look at it, they're 13-4, but we have them beating teams like Seattle, teams like Pittsburgh, twice. They could be 13-4, they could be 14-3, but they also could be 11-6, 12-5, and it doesn't really mean it's their bad team. They just have a very difficult schedule. But when you're looking at Cincinnati, to me, I feel like they're 13-4. Their ceiling is 15-2. I think they're going to lose to one of those top teams in the league, and they're going to have that one loss where they just should not lose. Their floor is 10-7. I know some people say, well, that's crazy, crazy low. Like I said, this schedule is very tough. I feel like it has to be one of the hardest schedules in the league. Because, I mean, when you look at some of these teams who are out of the division, when you're playing Kansas City, when you're playing the Bills, playing the Seahawks, 49ers, those are four very, very talented teams. Also, out of the fact, this is the AFC North we're talking about. I feel like it's the best division in the NFL. It's certainly debatable. It's been one of the most underrated and best divisions in the NFL for over a decade now. I feel like no an AFC North game is a 100% win. No matter what I think of Cleveland, the Ravens, I feel like they're two good teams, and we could slip up and lose against them. But this is just a very difficult schedule for Cincinnati. I have us 13-4, the ceiling 15-2, and the floor is 10-7 for Cincinnati's upcoming season.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it has to get to worse. Also, I apologize. I am still having some camera issues. My camera's being a little funky on me. So, but I agree. It is a really hard schedule. It, like you said, the Bengals are going to have a few of those losses. I would not be surprised. Like you said, the Seahawks, I think the Texans, like you said, is very possible as well. So we'll see. But I think after all, 15-2 is possible. Like we both agree, it is just it's just really hard to do. It's really hard for the Chiefs. It's really hard for the 49ers. But at the end of the day, Bengals will win the division. They should hopefully win the conference and hopefully come in with this number one seed.
So when you look at Cincinnati, we both have them at 13-4. We have a couple of games we disagree on, but for the most part, we kind of agree on pretty much everything. When you look at Burrow this upcoming season, we've kind of talked about that. We kind of think this is the year for Burrow to possibly kind of cement himself as a top quarterback. If he wins the Super Bowl, I think this is the year Burrow could very well end up winning the MVP. But when you look at Joe Burrow and this Bengals team, Joe Burrow threw for over 4,400 yards last season. The year prior, he threw for 4,600. And, when you look at this last season, he threw for 35 touchdowns. He threw for 34 touchdowns the year prior. When you look at Burrow, it's very interesting because you don't know, like, when you look at Joe Burrow, you don't know how he's going to perform this season, whether it's exceeding expectations to kind of stay the same. Ultimately, to me, I think this is the year we could see Burrow have, career numbers. I mean, those were very, very impressive numbers for a quarterback who's only played in the league for a couple of seasons. I think this year he takes a leap even better. It's kind of crazy to think a guy like Joe Burrow has not hit his ceiling yet. I think he'll have a career year. Ultimately, I think Burrow will end up winning the MVP this season. I think he's going to, toss for over 40 touchdowns. He's not done it yet in his career. But when you look at the weapons he has Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, Irv Smith Jr., who I think if he's healthy, he will be a very productive and nice tight end for Cincinnati. When you're looking at Joe Mixon, he's the guy who catches out of the backfield a lot recently. I mean, Joe Mixon had a career high in receptions and receiving yards last season. But I think this is the year where we could see Burrow toss over 40 touchdowns. And I think it's more likely Joe Burrow tosses for over 40 touchdowns than under 40 touchdowns. He's not done yet in his career, but I think this is the year he kind of takes his next step and becoming a great quarterback and toss for over 40 touchdowns this year.
Yep, I am sorry about that. I am back. Hopefully my phone will stop crashing. But I agree. This offense is so explosive. We see the improved offensive line. We see the same offensive weapons. Jamar Chase, it feels crazy to say, but he can only get better, as well as T. Higgins. We know exactly what we have in Tyler Boyd. We have all the weapons there. I think this offense is just going to keep getting better. I think Joe Burrow, I think we both have a bit of a fear with his coming off another injury again, having no kind of perfect or direct off season. I do think he will be coming in a bit hotter, a bit healthier last year. I think he'll perform a bit better at the beginning of the season, something we haven't seen too often in his young career. But so yeah, I think because of that, that may help him get to the 40. While the Bengals may get hot at the end of the season, Joe Burrow gets hotter. He may just have a lot more yardage and stats from the first half of the season. So yeah, I think expecting him to have over 40 touchdowns is very reasonable.
And when you look at Burrow, the expectations are just so high, and then you think he's going to have a career year. And then somebody else who, last season I thought for sure he was going to have a career year, and he could not have proved me more wrong, was Joe Mixon. Like, I thought, honestly, Joe Mixon had potential to have 2,000 total yards last year. And I know it sounds crazy, but when you look at it, I feel like there was kind of things that kind of, not necessarily helped my case, but when you look at Joe Mixon, I kind of mentioned, I mean, his receptions and his receiving yards are going up. It seems like every year. When you look at Mixon, they're getting him more involved in the pass catching game. He had 441 receiving yards, I believe, last season. He had less than 900 rushing yards last year, which is ridiculous. He had the lowest rushing yards per game since his rookie season. I think Mixon's going to get over 1,500 total yards this year, uh, pretty easily, honestly. When you look at Mixon, he had 25% of his rushing yards was in one game last year, and that was against Carolina. And, I was stupid enough to start DJ Moore in my flex over Joe Mixon. I lost cause of that. And that still ticks me off. And if that didn't happen, I would have been like top 3 in my league. I would have won some money. But it's still very, very frustrating. But when you look at Mixon, um, I think he's going to have over 1,000 rushing yards this year. I would expect kind of the more so 1,100 to 1,200 range. I think he's still going to get those receptions like he did last season. I think it'll kind of be around the same, but I think Mixon's going to get 1,500 yards total. I think he's going to surprise people this season. And there's lots of doubters, with him. Lots of people want him cut with all the off the field stuff this past season. It's just kind of been a wild off season for Joe Mixon. I feel like when you look at all the Bengal players on their roster, I feel like there's two players who kind of really going out to trying to prove people wrong this season. I feel like once Joseph Asai, everybody's talking about that, penalty in the AFC Championship game, which I think sucks. He had a great game, and I think he has potential to be a really nice edge rusher. I think the others Mixon, just because so many people wanted him gone, all the off the field stuff. He sucked last season. There was no reason he should have been that bad. But this is the year I think Mixon could possibly have a career year this year, solely based on he's going to get it going with a rushing game. Last year, I feel like it was just a fluke year with the receiving attack with it. I think he's going to be a top 5, top 6 running back in the league this season.
I completely agree. While it may not be at top 5, I do think we see this be one of, if not his best career. The offensive line, it actually got better this year, unlike last year. And he did deal with a lot last year. And the off the field stuff, that smoke has settled. He's coming in with a clear focus. He took the pay cut, so it's all on him. I think he responds. I think he has been waiting for this opportunity. I think because of Samaje Perine being gone, I think we're going to see him get even more opportunities in the passing game. Yeah, I think he's going to rack up a lot of yardage this year, whether if it's run or receiving.
And you mentioned with the improvement of the offensive line, I've mentioned a couple of times, it just does not get the talk or the recognition that it deserves. When you look at Cincinnati, when you look at the Halloween performance when they got blown out by the Browns on Halloween, I believe after that in the regular season, the Bengals did not give up 3 sacks in a game. Like, it's not a coincidence. The Bengals were in a hot streak and were the best team in the league in that span when Joe Burrow wasn't getting sacks. The pass offense line was great. The running O line protection was just very inconsistent, and it was a big reason why Mixon was kind of just unreliable with the rushing attack at times. I mean, I believe Samaje Perine had as many 100-yard performances last year as Mixon. I think Perine had a 100-yard game against the Chiefs, if I remember correctly. But I think this year Mixon's going to have a bounce back year, and with the offensive line, with the offensive line, I think it may kind of take a week or two to kind of gel it together and get this chemistry going, kind of like last season. But I think it's going to help Burrow. I think it's going to help Mixon. We both think Burrow is going to toss for 4 touchdowns. When you look at Burrow, honestly, I don't think he's going to get 5,000 passing yards. I think it could be close. Yeah, like I said, he had 4,400 last season. He had 4,600 in 2021 season. But when you look at that, both those were in 16 games. I'm not really counting the Bill. I mean, they played 17 games technically, but I mean that Bills game was less than a quarter. The 2021 season, he did not play the final game because Brandon Allen started against the Browns. I don't think Joe Burrow throws for 5,000 yards. I could see maybe him throwing for 4.7 or maybe 4.8. But I mean, if you're having 4,700 yards, we both think he's getting over 40 touchdowns. He's going to be a top three quarterback in the league. And if he wins for Cincinnati, like we both expect him to be, I feel like this is just kind of furthering cementing Burrow as the second best quarterback in the league, and kind of proving. I just don't think it's close. I feel like there's a big gap between Mahomes and Burrow, and there's a big gap between Burrow and anybody else. And Burrow, I think he's going to have a great season this upcoming year.
Yeah, I agree. I think 5,000 yards is pushing it a little bit. I think that is a lot more difficult than people seem to realize, despite barely anybody being able to reach that milestone. I just think people take it for granted, think it's too easy. In order for this to happen, the Bengals can't have those, oh, shoot games. They need to basically perform as they need to every week, and we just know that's not going to happen. So I think because of those one or two bad, unnecessary games, that's going to make him fall behind a little. But I agree with everything you said. It's going to be close to probably 4,700, and throwing over 40 touchdowns. Even if he doesn't quite get the 5,000 yards, he's going to establish himself as a top three, top two quarterback in the NFL.
So, what do you think when you look at Burrow? I think I know your answer. I want to make sure when you look at Burrow and Mahomes, like I don't think it's close. I don't even think it could be a debate until Burrow wins the Super Bowl. When you look at it, even if Burrow wins Super Bowl this year, do you still think Mahomes is better? Because I would say Mahomes is still going to be better, but I feel like you can't even have that conversation until Burrow wins a Super Bowl. I don't care about MVPs, I care about Super Bowls, but I feel like you have to win a Super Bowl to be on the conversation with Mahomes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is a noticeable gap between Mahomes and Burrow. I think Burrow can tighten that gap by getting a Super Bowl win, but even if, from a 100% pure talent standpoint, Mahomes is the better player, he has won more. Even if Bengals do win a Super Bowl this year, that's the reality of it. Mahomes is just insanely talented. You're not a fake fan for saying Mahomes is the best quarterback in the league. He is. There has to be a best, and he is. And I don't think anybody is actually trying to argue it. If you are saying he is not, you're lying to yourself.
And when you look at, you said you're not a fake fan for saying Mahomes is better than Burrow. I mean, it's ridiculous. The amount of Bengal fans who think Burrow is better, I just don't get it. Burrow is great, but I just don't think you can even compare it. I mean, Mahomes has two Super Bowls. Burrow has one appearance. I mean, Mahomes has three. What Mahomes has been able to do is historic. I doubted him for years and did not like him like at all really to the past couple of years. But it's one of those things you just kind of like wake up and realize like you may not like him, but you got to appreciate his greatness basically. Because when you look at the Chiefs last season, people they might not even win their own division. They're not going to win a Super Bowl. They're not going to win the AFC. Not only do they win a division, not only are they the best team in the league, they win the Super Bowl without Tyreek Hill. I just cannot imagine the Bengals and Joe Burrow. If you take Jamar Chase away from the equation, Joe Burrow winning a Super Bowl without Jamar Chase. I'm not saying he has to need his weapons and he relies on his weapons, but that's just the difference in the gap between Mahomes and Burrow. Burrow had several performances last year where he sucked. I mean, he got outperformed by Mitchell Trubisky in week 1. He got outperformed by Cooper Rush in week 2. I know it's debatable. I think Teddy Bridgewater played better than Burrow. I think it was week 4 or week 5. There was another game or two where Burrow played very inconsistent. I know people give the excuse, with the appendix surgery, but still, people, Mahomes did that. People, look at Mahomes, look at Mahomes. Burrow got outplayed by very, very average quarterbacks. It's very uncharacteristic in something you would hardly ever see if Mahomes got outperformed by freaking Cooper Rush and Mitchell Trubisky despite injuries. I mean, if Mahomes got outperformed by Cooper Rush, that'd be the only thing people will be talking about. Oh, can you believe he got outperformed? But you don't hear that as much as Burrow, and I feel like that kind of helps our case for saying Mahomes is better, simply because you don't hear the outcry or national attention for Burrow getting outplayed by a average quarterback as you would from Mahomes, because you expect for more from Mahomes than Burrow, if that makes sense and stuff.
Yeah, I agree. I just don't think Burrow is on the same wavelength as Mahomes because Burrow does have those few games where he tremendously struggles, and I think that is a separate. And I just from pure talent, I do think we see some more athleticisms with Mahomes. I think that goes without saying at this point. But yeah, I do think there is a noticeable gap between Burrow and Mahomes, and I don't think that is quite. I don't, and I just don't think Burrow's going to be able to close it within this next year.
Yeah, like even if he wins the MVP in the Super Bowl, which I think he's definitely capable of, and I feel more confident of him doing both of those things this year than last year, I still would take Mahomes over Burrow. And when you look at Cincinnati, it's very interesting. Like, lots of people are expecting a career year for Burrow, a monster year from Jamar Chase. But there's some players just people aren't really talking about it. Maybe there's some Bengal players who might have not a lot of talk, and they might surprise some people this season. But when you're looking at breakout players for Cincinnati's upcoming season, who were some breakout players you think might have a breakout year for Cincinnati's upcoming year?
It's the cliche answers, but I'm going to go with it. Dax Hill, Cam Taylor Britt. We saw Cam Taylor Britt really shine towards the end of last year. He got better week by week. There's no reason to think that momentum is going to stop. Then we had Dax Hill. We saw very little of him last year, but he showed us everything we were hoping he would show us in the preseason. So this is one I do not want to overthink. I think we are going to see them step up big, fill in the roles Cam Taylor Britt being that boundary corner the Bengals need, and Dax Hill being the new Jesse Bates being the long-term free safety. I think they step into those roles just as we had hoped they would.
I mean, those are two great answers. When you put, Cam Taylor Britt, I think by the end of the season, we could be looking at him as a top maybe 12, top 15 corner in the league. He played great in Chidobe Buzier's absence last year, and it seemed like literally, like when you watch a Bengal game, it's not something like it's not a hyperbole. Literally, when you watch a Bengal game, every single game, Cam Taylor Britt was getting significantly better, and if they can kind of stay on that, I feel like it would even be better this upcoming year. But one breakout player for me, I kind of mentioned earlier, I think it's going to be Joseph Asai. And I know it's kind of an unpopular opinion. I always kind of like to, find a lesser known Bengal player for a breakout year, for different, awards and stuff like that. But when you look at Osai, he had a, okay year. He had 3.5 sacks. When you look at him, this last 4 games, he had a 2.5 sacks for Cincinnati. And when you look at that Chiefs game, it kind of frustrates me a lot when you look at the AFC Championship game against Cincinnati. Joseph Asai had a career game. He had 5 tackles in that game. He was all over the field. He had great plays for Cincinnati, but just people aren't talking about it. And honestly, people just don't care because he made late hit penalty that eventually led to a Chiefs field goal, and the Bengals ended up losing that game. I feel like that's kind of crappy for people to oh, he's terrible, whatever. But when you take him away from that equation and take him away from that defense, he would have been, the Bengals defense would have possibly given up more points. They would have not played as good. He was a big reason why the Bengals, kind of containing Mahomes at times. And when you look at the Bengals edge rushing group, I think Osai, Hendrickson, and Hubbard, I think they're all going to be really, really good this year. And I don't think, I'm kind of staying on the same topic, kind of not, but when you look at Osai, I think he's going to get much more snaps than people realize. I think he's going to get way more snaps than Miles Turner. When you look at Osai, he's when you watch him play towards the end of last season, there's no reason he shouldn't be getting less snaps. He should only be getting way, way more. I know lots of people are expecting Miles Murphy to get a lot of more snaps and stuff, but when you look at it, I'm taking Osai over Murphy a lot of the times because I know. I just feel like Osai has potential. Murphy's not there yet. No, he's not played a game. But Hendrickson, when you look at the Bengals, they signed Hendrickson to a 1-year extension. Why would they already be extending Hendrickson? I'm not trying to overthink it, but why would you already be extending Hendrickson if Murphy hasn't played? Maybe he's not there yet, or maybe not really as what they expected so far. I don't feel like that was a bad signing by Cincinnati, but I know we both kind of agreed that, I mean, we both hope Murphy's good. I don't think that he's going to be as great as people think year one, simply because we have to have realistic expectations, because he's not going to be taking away snaps away from Hubbard or Hendrickson. And honestly, I don't think he should be taking snaps away from Osai, because I think Osai is due for a breakout year. But it'll be interesting how kind of like these Bengals rookies and stuff kind of like slowly transition to the offense and defense. How Murphy's going to slowly get more snaps and stuff. How DJ Turner, there's high expectations for him. How is Zach Taylor slowly going to put Charlie Jones into more offensive snaps, kind of taking the slot receiver plays away from Tyler Boyd? How's Yoshi Vosh maybe going to get some snaps here and there? But it's interesting because we talk about all these great players like Burrow, Chase, Higgins, but these younger guys, I mean, they're going to be a big part of our future. And it's like they might not be playing a lot of snaps right now, but I mean, here a couple of years, they're going to be starting for us and be a big piece of our success and stuff.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of unknowns. I don't think Murphy's going to take any snaps away from Osai. I really think we're going to see very little of Murphy this year. I think that was kind of established in the preseason, especially with his performance. I think everybody started to grasp the idea is like, okay, he really isn't there right now. Just because he's athletic doesn't mean he's some insane football player. So we'll see how that goes. I know we both have our concerns. Iosivas, I think he may unfortunately be getting a little overhyped as we go into the season. This may be a somewhat similar Auden Tate situation where, yeah, he performs well against backups. He can be a role player, but let's not try and build up more expectations that don't need to be there and that are unrealistic.
100%. I saw somebody post the other day, how many touchdowns would Yoshi Vosh get this year? Which to me, I mean, I would be surprised if he got two. And it's one of those things. I mean, he's not going to play a lot of snaps. Like, it's kind of crazy to think, like, oh, he's going to play a ton. I saw somebody say 7. I'm like, he's not going to, like, there's going to be 9 times out of 10, he might not play 7 snaps a game. Like, it's kind of crazy when, I mean, you mentioned Auden Tate. He was the guy I lied to, but it's just Bengal fans really had high expectations and unrealistic expectations for a guy who Bengal fans just kind of overrated. And then Yoshivash, at the time I didn't really love the pick, but the more I looked into it, I liked it a lot and stuff. He's such a speedster receiver. But I mean, it's preseason. We have to remember that he's playing against second and third string players. So his stats and his production on his films kind of been consistent. We got to see him play against top corners and stuff like that. I think he could be good, but we have to have realistic expectations for everybody. And I feel like with Murphy, like you said, he's not going to play a ton. I saw people say he's going to like 6 or 7 sacks. I think he's going to get 2, maybe 3. Not that it's going to be terrible. I just don't think he's going to play a ton. And I feel like Hendrickson, Hubbard, and Osai are going to have pretty good years and stuff. But I mean, it'll be interesting. And when you look at Cincinnati's upcoming season, I honestly think, I know I said the other day, this is the year we win a Super Bowl. I've never been more confident about the Bengals winning the Super Bowl. If we don't win it this year, I'm not going to say I'm concerned, but I am slightly concerned, I guess, because when you look at these players, everybody's going to be free agents 1 year from now. This is Andrew Mo's last year. I feel like it's pretty well known. I said it last year, but I didn't think anybody possibly thought Andrew Mo was going to stay for another year. Same thing with Callahan, but I think, when we're doing a video like this next year, we're going to be defending Super Bowl champs, which is crazy. I'm not trying to be overconfident and stuff, but I just feel like there's so many things when you go to Cincinnati, everything points their way to Super Bowl champs this year. I think Burrow will win MVP this year. We've kind of talked about that, but I mean, the expectation for Cincinnati, I don't think they've ever been higher. I know you could say last year, I think this year is higher simply because this is the best roster I've ever seen the Bengals team. But ultimately, I think this is the year the Bengals finally end up winning the Super Bowl.
Yep, I completely agree with everything you said. We should, at this time next year, we should be going to the season as defending Super Bowl champions, and I truly believe that.
It's just kind of crazy to think. I mean, when you look at 2020, when the Bengals beat the Steelers in Monday Night Football, I mean, I thought honestly we were going to lose by like 40 or 50. We ended up winning. And as pitiful and as embarrassing as it sounds, I mean, that was like a Super Bowl. Bengal fans won't admit it, but when the Bengals beat the Steelers in Monday Night Football, I feel like that was a Super Bowl because we haven't beat them in 5 years. I mean, they're the most like historic franchise ever. They're our biggest rival at that time. Nobody thought we were going to win that game, and we dominated that game. And I feel like that was just a spark that the Bengals took. They really ran with that momentum. The following year, in the 2021 season, they've kept the same momentum. last year and now, and it's just crazy to think what a couple years to make. But kind of talking about the Bengals schedule, breaking down every single game, kind of having making predictions for some players and stuff like that, over unders for Burrow and Mixon. So that kind of about does and stuff. So Braden, can you kind of tell some of the listeners who can follow you on social media?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can follow me on Instagram, Bengals_NFL. That is where I am the most active, where you'll see the most Bengals content. You can follow me on Twitter, Bengals_action. Bengals NFL was taken before me, but I tweet a lot, usually about the Bengals, sometimes some WWE, sometimes some movie stuff, just kind of vague on there. And then you can follow me on YouTube if you please under my name, Braden Guthrie. I am not overly as active on there, admittedly. So you're not missing out on there much, admittedly, if you are not. And those are the main places you can follow me.
Yeah, I'll definitely put the links in the description below so people can check out your content and stuff. And if you check me out on Twitter, S2 Hein Show, the Sports 2 Hein Show on Instagram. If you're new to the channel or it's new before, I would appreciate it if you could like this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I would really, really appreciate it. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you all next time on Sports 2 Hein Show.